Hello and welcome to another video. Thank you so much for joining me today on another Macro Bytes video. So today I want to talk about Canon's 100mm macro lens and the MPE 65mm macro lens 5x magnification. Which one of these two lenses is right for your photography? Let's find out. So let's talk about some of the pros and cons of the 65mm to start with. And one of the first things you'll notice about this is compare it to the 100mm and it is a little bit smaller. Now, obviously when you get it fully extended, it then becomes a lot larger than the 100mm macro in comparison. So pro, when it's smaller, it's more portable. When it's extended, it can be a con. It's no heavier, or it's probably about the same weight as the 100mm macro, but when it's extended, the weight obviously will distribute through the whole lens, and if you've got it on a body, this could become front heavy, but it's got its own base, so you can actually attach that to the tripod, which makes it a lot more workable. So let's talk about the 65mm's versatility. Now, it's not a very versatile lens in the sense of it can only be used for macro. Now, that's okay if you're into macro photography, then this is a great lens, and it is more versatile than the 100mm in that respect because it does all the way up to 5x magnification. And when used properly, this lens produces excellent image quality, and I'll pop some images up on the screen of the photos I've taken with it. So this lens does have a 100mm working distance at 1x magnification, and then as you go through the magnifications, it gets shorter and shorter, right down to 41mm for the 5x magnification. So at 5x magnification, to get consistently good images, you will need a tripod. I would say a definite con for this is it is manual focus only. There is no autofocus on it. However, when I shoot macro, I generally shoot manual focus anyway, occasionally autofocus, but 9 times out of 10, it will be manual focus anyway. So it's not really a con for me. One of the other cons to this is the depth of field is super shallow. Now we're talking so thin that it's almost impossible to get handheld. You can get some really nice images with it, but I think you would need to stack the images to get the best out of this lens. Another con to this lens is the end, as you can see, is such a small opening. When you're trying to shoot an insect, that becomes very difficult to actually find the target in the first place. It's got such a narrow area of a field of view that it can be quite difficult to find the insect that you're looking for. So that could be a little bit of a con. Once you get used to it, it's not too bad. There are techniques you can use to actually overcome that, but generally I would say that was a con. So another con to this lens, when you're shooting 5x magnification, you really do need a tripod and a flash to get the best out of this lens. So your equipment that you carry around starts to grow. So price-wise, they do come in around the same sort of price, but I have seen these second-hand for about £500 and these second-hand for about £800. So these ones might be a little bit dearer when you're purchasing second-hand. So let's talk pros to the 65mm. Now the biggest and most obvious selling point to this is the 65mm does do 5x magnification. So that is what you're going to be purchasing this for predominantly, the fact that it does get a lot closer to your subject. So another pro to this is that it is compact compared to the 100mm, and it does leave a little bit extra space in your bag, maybe for a battery, nothing more than that, but it is more compact. So you could probably take a smaller size bag than needed with the 100mm. So another pro is that it does have an aluminium, or a metal body. It is very robust and very sturdy. The build quality is second to none. And another pro for this is the sharpness of the images. It does take fantastically sharp images. So all in all, this is a great lens. It's a 5x magnification, which is going to be the main selling point, and you can get really creative with that. On top of that, very compact, average price range, and it's a very robust lens. So overall, I would say the 65mm macro was better suited for people that are a bit more advanced in photography and are dedicated to macro photography, or creative people. So it's very hard to use. It does need a tripod, it does need flash, and to get the consistently good images. And if you're just starting out photography, you're not going to be able to use it for anything else. So if you get bored in macro, this lens is going to be sat on your shelf gathering dust. Whereas if you're a creative person, this is going to be very useful at home. You can stick it on a tripod at home, set it up in a little studio, or set it up on your desk or in your office, wherever, and you can just have this and play about with all the infinite things that you can get in macro, like the photo I showed earlier with the sugar crystals. So let's jump on to the 100mm. Now the 100mm lens is a very versatile lens. Not only is it good for macro, it's good for portrait photography, and it has an infinite focusing point. So with the 65mm, you're very limited. You've only got the macro range to play with, whereas this can be used in all situations. Obviously it is a fixed focal length of 100mm, so that's the only downside to that, but it's very versatile in the sense that you can take a lot more variety of shots with it. So another pro for the 100mm macro is it is image stabilized, making those handheld shots a little easier to get. So another pro to this is the autofocus. It is fast and accurate on this, whereas the 65mm has no autofocus, this does have it. So if you're starting out in macro photography and you need that extra help with the autofocus, this is the lens to choose. And it goes without saying, being an L lens, that this is the superior of the lenses, as it does have superior optics and build quality. So I would say the 100mm macro was best suited for someone just starting out in macro photography, or someone that just likes to handhold shots. So this is very easy to handhold shots, and it's good for starting out in photography because it has the image stabilization and it has a superior autofocus on it. Fantastic autofocus is going to get you those shots that are in focus and sharp. The other thing with this is that it is very versatile, so it can go from just a standard macro lens to portraits, so it gives you more choice with the lens. So if you did pick it up as a beginner, you weren't that interested in macro, you can still use the lens for other things. So I'm not saying that the 100mm macro is just for beginner photographers and the 65 is for more professionals. Obviously it depends on your style and how you feel, but I would suggest if you were looking for a lens and you were just starting out, the 100mm macro is probably the better one if you're not sure on macro photography. So if you're not 100% sure that you want to carry on doing it, this is the better lens because it's more versatile, so you can get more out of it. But it's a little bit more forgiving when you're actually shooting things that in macro. Handheld, for example, it's image stabilized and it's got the autofocus, which will help you get those better shots. So it's a little bit more forgiving, and it's a bit more easier to use in the sense that there's not a big learning curve in using it. Whereas the 65mm is almost like the deep end of macro photography straight away. You need a tripod, you need a flash, you need to know your focusing distance because you're doing manual focus, and all those little things that come into play once you've been doing photography for a little bit longer. You really do need that in with using the 65mm macro. And that's not saying that a beginner couldn't use the 65mm, it's just a little bit more of a learning curve. So it's a little less stressful using the 100mm than it is the 65. If it's 100% something you want to go to, then obviously that's a good lens to pick straight out because it saves you wasting money on 100mm macro and then upgrading to the 65mm. But if you know you're definitely going to use it, so maybe borrow somebody else's, rent a lens from someone and just play about with which ones you like best. But that's my suggestions. So the sway is a technique used by macro photographers, and it goes something like this. Now you probably can see that I'm moving a little bit, but that is literally all it is. It's the tiniest of movements backwards and forwards. So the purpose of the sway is obviously when you're not on tripod, you want to focus on a subject that's still. So say there's an insect on this branch, for example. I'm going to use my focus ring to move backwards and forwards, but because my body naturally moves, I can't stay perfectly still. What I might end up doing is I might focus toward the subject and my body might be moving away from the subject. So you have two conflicting movements. So you'll find it 10 times harder to get an accurate in focus shot that way. So whereas if you move your focus to the closest focusing point, or the point where your subject's in focus, that you want it in focus, and then don't focus anymore, and then just use that sway to bring your subject in and out of focus. And using this technique will increase the amount of shots that you come away with that are in focus. Right, so first thing you need to do, get a good stance. So feet shoulder width apart, get knees slightly bent, and you've got your core enabled then, so you can keep yourself nice and steady. You can either use live view on the back of the camera, or you can put the camera up to your eye. Now if you've got it up to your eye, it will give you another point of contact, so it'll make it a little bit more stable for you. And then just practice keeping in one spot of focus as long as you can. And if you think holding your breath helps, then hold your breath for that whilst you take that shot. So with modern cameras, you've got a drive mode that you can change, and you can choose from single shooting to multiple shots, all in one, and silent, and whatever the different ones your camera will have. Pick one that suits your conditions and your type of style, how advanced you are at macro photography. So obviously if you're as far along as I am, I can pretty much go on single shot and then take the image with one shot, and 9 times out of 10 get that in focus. So try and pick the one that suits you. So whether you want to move, if you go multiple shots, you can move through the focal range. If you put your camera into a high-speed continuous shooting, you can sway backwards and forwards and then take multiple images. The only problem with that is you're going to end up with a lot of images on your camera, and there's a lot of post-processing to go through all the images to see which ones are in focus. But it might guarantee that you get a good shot. So start with that and then work your way down to single shot, and then just try and get a single shot where you just go, for practice sake, just find a subject, get the focal point, take one shot, check it on the back of your camera, see whether it's in focus. If not, try again, and just keep doing that. Because sometimes with insects, especially insects, you don't have time to set your camera up and what. So you can come across an insect and you can just literally take a shot like that and it'll be in focus. So once you get to that level, you're going to up your, obviously it's going to up your game, and that's the level you want to get to. So just to quickly demonstrate what I'm talking about, I'm going to take a blank image on my camera. So there's a blank image. I'm going to take an image of this leaf, and then I will take another blank image so you can see that this is an actual image. First shot, one time, one take, and it will be the shot on the camera. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an image where the stem splits off. It splits into multiple parts here, well, just above the leaf. So that's the image I'll be taking. That's the focus point, just so you know. But there is a quicker way of doing this, and if you check out the next video in the playlist when it drops, that video will show you how you can get this image quicker. So just to show how long it takes to do this and that it can be done. Now bearing in mind that this leaf is blowing in the wind also, so it shows you how tricky this can be. Okay, so there's the image. Just quickly take the blank image, just so you can see there's the blank image, there's the image, and there's the other blank image. So just to show you the focal point that I was talking about, right where it splits off. So that, I don't know how well that's coming up on that camera on the back of there. Yeah, you can see that. So yeah, so that right there is how you do that. So the one thing us macro photographers like to bring with us at all times and use on a regular basis is our hands. So we use our hands to hold the camera, but also to steady the object. And let me just show you what I mean by that. There are two main techniques you can use as a macro photographer. The first one's called the pinch. Now, if there's an insect just on this leaf, which there isn't, but if there was just on this leaf here, I could pinch the end of it, and then I could use my thumb to put on the end of the lens, and that will give me another point of contact for my lens, for my camera, so it will be a little bit more sturdy. Secondly, what that does is it keeps the distance between the insect and the end of my lens the same. So what I'm doing is I'm controlling where the distance is, and then what I do is I just move this with my hand and just move this in and out of focus until I get the right focal point, and then I can take my shot. So that will make it a lot easier to get your shot first time, like so. So you will get an in focus shot usually. Once you get good at it, you'll get better at it. It will become easier and easier and easier. But that's one technique you can use. There's a second technique you can use, and I'll show you that now. The second technique is the lean. Now it's similar to the pinch, where we use our thumb as a support for the end of the lens, but instead of pinching a leaf, we're actually leaning against something that we're taking an image of. So we're going to position ourselves on whatever it is we're taking a photo of. Then we're going to use our thumb just to bring the camera in and out of focus on the focus plane, depending on what the subject is. So it all depends on the type of subject you're taking a photo of. If it's inanimate or it's very still or not moving very fast at all, you can use the lean. And if it's moving on a leaf or branch, you can use the pinch. And both these techniques will improve how quick you can get your images. So use this in conjunction with the sway video. So the sway one is more for if you have something on, say, an end of a leaf, and you don't want to reach up over and cast a shadow in it, or you might scare the insect off. That one's a little bit more of a, maybe it's a spider web and you've got nothing to lean on, for example. So that will be what you'd use that for. And then this one is when you've got something that's not moving, or it's a little bit more docile because it's coming like late evening and they're just settling down, and you can actually approach things and move things around. So that's the main two techniques for focusing that I would use. So get practicing with those and see what images you can come up with. So that is the pinch and lean technique. Now I am gonna say that's an exclusive to this channel. The pinch and lean technique has never been done anywhere else before. The name, I mean, not the technique. And also the sway, get using that sway as well in conjunction with the pinch and lean. And I also think the sway, I don't know, sway is probably a bit pushing it for my exclusive, isn't it? But, well, get using them anyway, and see whether you can reduce the amount of shots that you take when you're doing your macro photography. Now, we haven't got an actual insect here, so what I've got is I've got a little subject here. So we're going to pretend this is an insect. So it's sat on a log at the moment. Now, the way I approach my subjects is I don't know how skittish they are, and all insects have different degrees of skittishness. And I don't know if that's a word, but I'm going to take that one as my own, another exclusive for the channel. So they all react differently. So as you approach them, some will just fly away or run away, and some will just sit there. And you can get, I've got pretty close to insects before, and they're not bothered at all. And I've moved them around on leaves, and they'll just sit there. They're not bothered. So all depends on what you're shooting. So this is a general rule. What I generally do is I'll probably come halfway out my focus range, and then I will just take that image. I can use my autofocus for this at this point. Take an image, and then what I do is I move closer. And then as I get closer, again using the autofocus, take a photo. And then once I get all the way to the end of my range and I'm at my closest focusing point, I'm close enough to then start implementing the sway, because you want to use your sway technique. So if you try and use your autofocus, it might hunt backwards and forwards, and then what will happen is you'll either miss the chance to get the shot, or it just won't focus on it. So the easiest way is to get it all the way to the minimum focusing distance, and then just sway backwards and forwards so you get the image that you want. Then once you've got that image, then start using your hand, and then you can just guide yourself into different positions, different compositions, however you want to take the image. And that is the way that I approach all insects. So if it's sitting on something, then that's how I would do it. If it's obviously running, flying, all that is a different scenario. But insects that are usually on something, so there's a little gnat just it's flown away because I just poked at it. So any insect photography that I do on something, generally on a leaf, on a tree, or wherever it is, that's how I would approach those types of shots. So those ones are pretty straightforward. They're, it's trial and error. You'll kind of learn the insects that you can and can't get closer to, and you'll just know some flies, there's some species of flies, you'll recognize them and you'll think, oh, I can get really close to that. There's a yellow one, I can't remember what it's called now, but there's a yellow one that we have here, and it's pretty much the tamest fly. I can get really close, and the interesting thing with macros as well is they'll turn and look at you, which I think is really interesting. So they'll see you getting close to them, so they'll turn to face you, and it gives you a chance to get different angles as well, which is awesome. So give that a go. Get out there shooting just all types of insects, and again, like I said, you'll learn which ones you can and can't get close to, but approach them in that way, and then that way you're guaranteeing yourself a shot, and then the better shot comes later. So the first of the 5 tips I've got for you today is compositional based, and that is the angle that you shoot at. So it's very easy in the macro world just to point down at something and shoot and take a shot, and that's it, forget it, walk away. But that's not going to make a great image. Getting a great image means getting down lower, getting on the ground with your subject, or getting below your subject and shooting up on it. Those are the ones, because it's more of an eye level with your subject, and it's more intimate. So it's getting closer and getting level with the subject that's going to make a great image. So let me show you what I mean with this bit of moss on top of this fence post. Okay, so the first shot I'm going to get is I'm going to point down and I'm going to shoot at the subject. Okay, so that's that image. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get level with it and take the same image or similar image, and then I'm going to go down below and shoot up. Okay, so that's the 3 images, top down, eye level and below. Let me know in the comments which you think is the better of the 3. So the next tip is simple, and that is to simplify. So let's say we were going to take an image of this lichen on this twig here. So you can see behind it we've got quite a few twigs and bits of branches popping out all over the place, and as an image as a whole it'll be quite messy, and there's quite a lot in the scene. Excuse me a second while I come around here. Now if we were to shoot it from this angle and just move this one out the way, we've now got a lot less behind our image. I know there's all that stuff at the back, but that will be blurred out with the aperture that we choose. So simplifying the image, removing the stuff that's in the scene that's not necessary, and thinking about what you put in your image is going to make the image a lot nicer. So by having less in it can make it more interesting. Now there's a few rules that you can follow. So when placing your image, if it's a singular image in the frame, then using the rule of thirds can help. Also remembering that if it's insects, for example, if you're shooting insects, the way they're facing the lead room should be more than what's behind them. Otherwise they can seem quite closed in and it won't make a very nice image. But other than that, keeping the image nice and simple will get you a great image, and I'll just show you a demonstration of that now. Okay, so let me show you. The first image would be with the background. Okay, so that's those two, but you can also go one step further with simplifying, other than just removing the background, and that is isolating your subject. So if you've got a subject that's quite complex, let's say for example this little bit of tuft of lichen here, by taking a photo of it like that, is going to give you a nice image. But if you isolate it completely and just cut off a little bit of it, then I get a cleaner image with less clutter in, and it's more simplified, which I think personally makes a nicer image. Okay, so the next tip is add some interest in your photo. Now, we've just talked about taking distractions away, which this is a little bit different. This is something that adds to the photo rather than distracts from it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a picture of one of these petals that are growing, and then we're going to add some interest to that petal and see the difference. Okay, so that's the image with no interest in it. It might be a little bit soft, a bit hard to tell. The light's going down, I might have to start adding a flash. So this is what I'm adding to this scene. Now, interest can be anything from adding a bug, adding a leaf, adding anything you want. But in this instance, as it's a petal, I'm just going to spray a little bit of water onto the petal. And I'm going to take that image again. Okay, so that's that image, and I'll pop that up on the screen. Have a look at the two, see which one you think's better. Right, so I've just come across some bracket mushroom, and it's going to demonstrate my next point perfectly. So my next point is lighting. Now I'm not talking flash. You can use flash to illuminate your subject, but I'm talking about just playing around with different types of light. So we've all tried flash, but have we tried off-camera flash using video lights to light our subject? And you can get some really interesting shots just by moving the light around and changing the colours. You can buy colour LED video lights, and you can change to blues and reds and oranges. And that's what I'm going to use here. I'm going to take this shot here. I'm going to shoot this from down below, and you'll see the gills here, and you'll see the difference that will make to what the gills look like with and without. Say without, but the light's dimming, but hopefully with and without the light to show you the difference. Okay, so there you can see, simply just by using a video light, we can completely change the look of that mushroom, and just getting a little bit creative with light, moving it around, changing the angles and intensities, you can get some interesting results and make your macro images really stand out. Well, if you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching. And one last point for you, which is check your focal point. Now, obviously having good focus is important, but where you focus on a subject is going to make all the difference to the scene, to the image. Now, with mushrooms, gonna fall over in a second. With mushrooms, you tend to focus on the very edge of the cap that's closest to you. Now, check out this image. I'll put an image up now. If I'd have done that on this image, which I did, but on the next image I'll show you what I did differently. So this image, I raised the tripod up a little bit, and I focused a bit further into the cap rather than the actual edge of the cap itself. And that's revealed all the stuff that's inside the mushroom, or inside the top of the mushroom, which I would have ordinarily missed. So that can give you a completely different looking image, and also change what the image looks like entirely in some cases. So if you were shooting an insect, for example, the usual focal point is the eye. So let's say you were shooting something with an interesting detail like a spider with some interesting leg colour, then maybe focusing on the leg might be the better option, because you might miss that unless you're stacking and you can get a good depth of field on it. But yeah, so just play around with where you focus on your image, and it will change what your outcome is. So in today's video, we're talking about 5 common mistakes people make when starting out in macro photography. 2 of these, so I've got 7 altogether, but 2 of them aren't really mistakes. They could be conceived as mistakes, I suppose. You judge for the end. At the end, I'll pop them on. And 1/3 bonus one, so there'll be 8 mistakes really. One of them has come from my son, who I taught macro photography to recently for his GCSEs, and he's got some really nice images. I'll pop one up here. I don't know if I've showed it before. But that mistake has come from him. I asked him what he thought was a mistake when learning macro photography. So that last mistake will come from my son. So without further ado, let's jump in and get on to the first mistake. The first mistake is depth of field. Now, obviously we all like the f2.8 end of the lens where it gives you that nice blurred background, but in macro photography we want to go somewhere in the middle of the range. So f11, f16, whatever's best for your camera or for your lens, whichever one gives you the best image. And the reason for that is because the depth of field in macro photography is so small, it gets really small. In portrait photography, if you're doing portraits, for example, you can focus and get most of the face in, or like a good portion of the face in. Whereas macro photography, you're going to get like the sliver of like a fly's wing, not even in focus. Like you're going to get like the tip of it in focus, and it's going to be that bad. So you want to go f11, say f15, and that's going to give you a nice. It's not going to get the whole insect in focus, but depending on what you're shooting, it's going to get a good portion of it in focus. Okay, the next mistake is shooting with the right light. Now, it's quite tempting to go out and just think, well, the sunlight will be fine. Like today it's okay, it's the sun's out, but it's a bit overcast, so we've got some direct sunlight, but it's not great. But what we got to remember with macro is the closer you get to something, the smaller that we shoot with macro, the more light we need to properly illuminate our subject. Now, there's a couple of options you can use to counter that, which is flash, on-camera flash or off-camera flash. Now, on-camera flash produces a light that's very sort of studio sort of thing. You're going to get the catch light in their eyes, so it's going to be quite portraiture, can't even say the word, a portraiture type light. Whereas off camera, you're going to be above and you're going to get some nice shadows. You're going to get some nice different looking images rather than straight on where everything's illuminated. So playing around with the light, I shoot both. I've got a ring flash that goes on the front of the lens, and then I've got an off-camera flash, which is what I'm using today. And I like to, there's certain situations where some can look good and some can look bad, so just playing around with that and getting the right light to illuminate your subject. So never shoot macro photography. I don't ever shoot in just sunlight, unless you're going to diffuse the light somehow with maybe a softbox, or have like a reflector or something that you can use to sort of take off that harshness of the light. Always try and go flash. Okay, so the next one would be shooting angles. So this angle that I'm shooting from now, it looks completely different to what you're normally used to seeing. You're normally used to seeing it straight on. A lot of macro photographers, a lot of people that do macro photography will do a dead straight down shot of something, or a dead level shot of something, those two main ones. But if you can get under it, shoot up, or if you can get, say, at the front of it, so it's like dead straight on, but then below it, so you get shooting up there. So just playing around with angles and just making the photo work for you. So don't produce the same angles that everybody produces. Try and get something interesting, move things around, shoot through things, or around things, so you've got something in front of your picture. When you do that, it will just make that picture more interesting. Have something else in the frame, maybe, play around with it and just see what you can come up with. But don't just shoot the top down, dead straight on, normal stuff. They look good, don't get me wrong. Insects, they always look good no matter what angle you shoot them at, but just try and play around with the different types of angles and get a bit lower, maybe get a bit, sort of, don't come top down, come a little bit further down, play around. Yeah, that's my next one. One of the mistakes that people often do is they use the autofocus on the camera. Now, that's obviously understandable as to why you'd think that the autofocus would be good, but with such shallow depths of field, the focus can hunt and it can just try and keep finding the focus point, because it doesn't know where it needs to focus to, so it will look all over the frame, and you can miss your shots like that. The other part of the focus, well, obviously you can manually focus, but even that can be quite tricky to get in the right place. Now, if you're shooting with an onboard flash, you could use that option. If you're using an off-camera flash like I'm using today, so an off-camera flash, I haven't got a free hand to focus. So the easiest way to combat that is turn your focus ring all the way to the right, so you're at your closest focus in distance, and then when you hold this to where you want it, and then all you can do is just rock backwards and forwards ever so slightly, and because your focal plane is so small, that's just going to adjust your focus. And I think that's probably the easiest way to get a good focus without autofocus missing the shot or having to prop this somewhere. It's just easy to freehand it when you've got just these two things in your hand, and you can get the shot that you need. And the last of the 5 common mistakes is not focusing on the eye of the subject. That's your window into their soul, if you like, and it's same with portrait photography. The eye's got to be in focus. That's the thing that's got to be in focus. Obviously artistic differences and creative differences and whatnot, but generally the eye should be in focus. So trying to get that eye as tack sharp as you can is going to make your image look a lot more impressive. So here's the bonus tip. If you see an insect on a leaf or a branch, wherever it is, spider maybe, take as many photos as you need to, get the photo that you want, and then when you finish taking the photos, start playing with your subject. So move it around. If it's on a leaf, move the leaf, and you'll find that they're quite, I'll show you this insect here, look, they're quite forgiving as to when you move them around. I haven't got my glasses on, so I can't see if this is in the shot. Is it there? Don't know, I'll just shoot wide, hopefully you can see it. But you can see there's an insect here, look. Move this leaf around. I can shoot this thing lower, and it's not really bothered by me. Some will be, some won't be, but if you take your shot and you finish taking your shot, why not try and move that insect to a better location? So for example, if you're photographing a spider and the spider's on the leaf, you can take, you can take that photo and then prod him with a little stick, just move him, you know, tap his legs a little bit, not tap, but you know, just gently try and move him a little bit. And then what it will do is he might move to the end of the leaf and put his feet over the leaf and make an interesting thing. You can shoot from down below and then shoot up to the spider, which will give it a much more interesting look. Okay, so the final tip, well, not final because I've got my son's one coming up, but the final one of mine is remembering your background. So when you're taking a photo of something that's micro, having a few twigs and leaves in the background can take the focus off of your subject. So just remembering what it is that's behind can make all the difference. So the last mistake comes from my son, which, as I said earlier in the video, he is doing his GCSEs and I taught him some macro photography. So I asked him what he thought was a mistake that he felt when he was doing it, getting into macro photography, that he could have done better or that he felt that he did wrong. And his mistake was he wasn't patient enough. And this is basically, you're going to go out and you're going to get sometimes no images, and sometimes you're going to get some great images. And we went out a couple of times. We went out, the first time we went out for about an hour, and we got about 4 or 5 images, I can't remember which. And then the second time we went out for probably about another hour, I would say about an hour, and we got 4 or 5 different insects, a couple of good images though. So, you know, having a bit of patience and allowing insects to come to you as well, I would add to that. Just because when you're walking through, if you imagine you're walking through a wood, things are flying around you all the time, insects are moving, and as you walk past stuff, it moves, and you're not going to catch a fly landing on a piece of a leaf. You're not going to get a fly landing on a leaf just as you're walking past and just happen to glance at it. You're going to have to stop and wait and just set up somewhere. Like this was the perfect example, and this is why I chose to do this. I've did all the images you see today are taken on this tiny little shrub, bush, whatever this is, and all the flies came to me. Now I did shower this morning. That's probably why my hair's so fluffy today. I don't know if have I mentioned that I've stopped growing this? I stopped growing it? No, I didn't. I stopped cutting it about 6 months ago. Don't ask me why, I just did. So it's a bit Buffonti. Yeah, so I have showered, so the flies aren't coming to me because I smell. They're coming to me because it's just a natural thing. They just come to the bushes. So, you know, have a bit of patience, wait for the opportunity, and set yourself up somewhere and just sit around and wait. And that genuinely they will genuinely come to you. Obviously, if you're looking for specific insects, then obviously you need to go to specific locations. But generally, if you sit around long enough in nature, there's thousands of things around you. You just got to look. Today I'm talking lighting. I've got a whole bag full of lighting stuff. We've got different price ranges and different types of lighting that I'm going to go through with you. So there's something in there for everyone. So just stay tuned for that. Just thinking about it, actually, it's middle of winter. I probably didn't need to come out in the woods for this. I could probably just stayed at home. Anyway, let's jump into that content. So if you don't own any of the following products that I'm going to show you, and you don't have the money to buy them, there is one light source that you can use that is free, and it is the sun. Now, it does require it to be sunny, daytime, and also you need to be either next to a window or outdoors. So there are some drawbacks to it, but it will get you started. It's a really good light source, especially when you're outside doing macro photography. You can use natural light, always looks a little bit better. So If you haven't got access to the sun and it's nighttime, then you can always use, if you're indoors, you can always use table lamps and ceiling lamps, which I didn't bring with me. It's a bit hard to get the ceiling lamps out and bring them here, but those ones are just the given ones that you've got around your house and in the sky. So that's the first one. So let's get on to number 2. The second thing that a lot of people will have in their homes, not everybody, but a lot of people, and is relatively inexpensive to buy, and that is a torch. So you can use a torch to light your subject. You can get various quality and strength torches, and yeah, very, very accessible. Normally you can get a torch that will do the job. So it's a bit harder to use because obviously you can either, well, not obviously, but you can one hand on the torch, one hand on your camera, or you can strap it, you can tie it to something, you can ask somebody to hold it, but it's a little bit harder, but it is a available light source. Which brings me on to number 3, which is similar to number 2, and that is a head torch. So this is the next thing that, on top of a torch, this is directional, so you can actually point it at what you're shooting at and you can take a picture. It does require a certain level of expertise to manage to get it in the right direction whilst also not getting your hands in the shot and a shadow in the shot, because obviously it is on your head, so it's a little bit harder. But yeah, another source that is quite good to use. And then we're going to get on to number 4, and that is a strip light. These are really good for macro photography if you're indoors. Sometimes you can use them outdoors. These ones are bi-colours. They have lots of different options to light them in a different way. So you can get, I use them a lot for mushroom photography. Always good. Light source. And then number 4, I don't know what number we're on. These ones are quite good because these are, I think they're reading lamps that you can get, but they're good. You can wrap them around trees. You can get, it's really cold, I've got my gloves on, but you can wrap them around trees and you can get better angles on stuff if you want to light certain things. So these things are always good to have if you can get hold of those. And then the most obvious is a speed light. Now these ones are really good if you're shooting on a camera and you've got that accessible to you. You've got one of these, you're going to get some really good shots with one of these. The next thing I would say is, to go along with the speed light, is some remote triggers. You can stick this on top of your speed light or underneath your speed light, and the other one goes on your camera. That one will sit on your camera, and then you can hold it and you can maneuver it in different areas. And then last but not least, is a ring flash. And these screw onto the front of your camera lens. So they come with a little bracket that you pick the one the size of your lens. So this is a 67mm, and you screw that to the front of the lens, and then that sits on there, and then you can take images with that. You can get some really nice images with that. It does leave a catch light in the eye because it's right in their eye, but it can look quite nice. Of all those objects that I've given you, every single one of them I've used, and every single one of them I've got acceptable pictures with. Obviously, ease of use, some of them are easier to use than others. Some of them are more expensive to run than others, and also some of them give a better looking, more professional look, like the ring light will give a more professional look than the torch, for example. So it's just about what you own and what's available to you and what you can afford to buy. If I was to choose the one to start off with that you didn't have a lot of money, then I would probably choose the strip light. I'd probably choose this one. You can get these on this. I think this was on TikTok Shop for about £6. So these are quite cheap, and these are quite good because they've got the thread at the bottom. You can secure it to things. If you've got a mount, you can secure it to the mount, or a tripod, it will secure to the tripod. So if you're at the low end, the budget end, I would definitely go with one of those over anything else. And if you're at the top end, then I would definitely go for the ring flash. But this one, yeah, it's probably the better one of all of them. The only problem with the ring flash is it's sometimes hard to get into gaps if you're shooting small gaps. The front of your lens is there, the small gaps here, the light's not going to go in the gap. I did have a problem with this once, so I had to go and stick this one on so I could actually get it into the gap, get the light where I needed it to. So that's the only drawback to that, but how often you run into that sort of problem? Probably not very often. So there you go. So that's my guide to lighting in macro photography. A nice, quick, simple video. So it just leaves me to say thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.